two hedgehog charities have drawn up the first national conservation strategy in an attempt to stop hedgehog numbers declining. The People's Trust for Endangered Species and the British Hedgehog Preservation Society have been working together for many years on hedgehog conservation. They say the number of hedgehogs has declined by as much as 75% in rural areas in the past 25 years. Now, that's a big number. Martin Maylin is the founder of the Hornbeam Wood Hedgehog Sanctuary in Hertfordshire. I asked Martin why the numbers are declining.
Good afternoon. Well, there's a number of reasons. So it depends. There's two areas, rural and urban areas. Generally speaking, though, the report that you've mentioned, it highlights the threats for hedgehogs in both areas. But essentially, it's a decrease in availability of natural food. So typically bugs, earthworms. Their natural habitats have been reducing, and it's actually becoming completely redundant, a lot of them. And that's hedgerows, typically open fields. So a lot of them being replaced with, tarmac and all the rest of it. Increasing vehicle collisions, so that's obviously a huge danger for hedgehogs. Unfortunately, when hedgehogs get scared, they tend to curl up into a ball, and they'll just sit there. So that's unfortunate. It's one of their instincts to protect themselves, but on the road, of course, that's horrendous for them. And then there's genetic sort of isolation. So a lot of the motorways, areas, they cut off zones of the country. So a lot of the hedgehogs are unable to venture further out than sort of the local area.
Martin, it sounds very much that if the decline is to be believed, I don't doubt it for 1 minute, to be honest with you, it's more our fault than it is the fault of the hedgehog.
Essentially, yes. Indirectly, unfortunately, things that people do affect many things, particularly wildlife. Essentially, a lot of the mass agricultural farming, a lot of new build houses have huge fences on them, walls around them, so they isolate areas and wildlife can't travel around the place. But there's also issues because, unfortunately, hedgehogs have all these spines. Well, fortunately for them, those spines now get entangled in things like plastic bags and netting, fishing lines and all kinds of things like that. So we have a lot of rescues for hedgehogs that just have gotten tangled in various plastic rubbish. Yeah.
I've been wanting to talk about hedgehogs on the programme for weeks now, and I'll tell you why, Martin, because my wife and I take our dog for a walk every night, and it's been really damp. And we keep saying, hang on, look at all these horrible, ugly slugs everywhere. Where have the hedgehog? Because we haven't seen a hedgehog for years.
Yeah, well, you probably walk in rural areas as well. So particularly rural areas, the populations have declined up to 75%. So they are faring a lot worse in the woodlands or the open fields in the country. So, yes, slugs are on the diet of hedgehogs, although they're not great for them. But typically they would eat earthworms or beetles, caterpillars, millipedes and things like that. But usually when you're walking your dogs and you're out in the field, there'd typically be a hedgerow following the public footpaths. And those were vital. They're vital corridors for wildlife. So the wildlife don't actually use the public footpath, but they will use the hedgerows as corridors or highways to get to different parts of the countryside.
Let's talk about this conservation strategy. How important is it and what is it?
It's extremely important. So the People's Trust for Endangered Species and the British Hedgehog Preservation Society have created the National Hedgehog Conservation Strategy. And actually that's been going on for a number of years. It's not something new. And in that, they highlight the threats that hedgehogs face and ways that people can help hedgehogs. And that can be as simple as in your garden hedgehog, and ensuring that things in your garden that are safe, like ponds have a nice ramp coming out of them. Maybe you've got a little vegetation at the back of your garden that's unkept, because hedgehogs will nest in hedges. That's sort of their natural habitat, but they will nest in long grass or unkept areas that have wildflowers in them, but also on a kind of a general wildlife habitats, and also the benefits of helping hedgehogs in your garden would be to plant hedges. So if you don't have hedges, plant some hedges in your garden, or protect areas that are dangerous. So if you've got open drain covers, they can be dangerous for hedgehogs, cover them up. Or if you have steep steps in your garden, some gardens do, they have to go up to certain levels, maybe make those steps shorter, or so the depth is a bit easier for hedgehogs to climb up the step.
Okay. And the work you do at Hornbeam Wood, how would you describe it, Martin?
So we rescue wild hedgehogs that are in need of help. So these hedgehogs typically would be found in dangerous places or have bad injuries that need help for both the vets or us in rehabilitation. Depending on the time of the year, we will rescue baby orphaned hoglets, usually spring, summer, autumn. And as we get into the winter time, which we're into now, we'll be rescuing hedgehogs typically that are underweight. They have to be a certain weight to survive winter because they hibernate. So if they're under a decent weight, usually it's around 450 grams, they end up not surviving that hibernation process. So then we overwinter those hedgehogs, release them back into the wild in the spring, summertime. But a lot of the hedgehogs we do rescue come from dangerous places. Last week we rescued a hedgehog from Hertfordshire University in their car park. 2 days ago, we rescued some hedgehogs from Tesco's stores in Hemel Hempstead. The hedgehogs wandered into the store, the big car park. Unfortunately, the mother left and there were 2 hoglets that needed rescue because they were orphans. So they struggle in all kinds of places, but generally speaking, their natural environment is being destroyed, basically.
You've described that beautifully. I mean, you're a family-run charity looking after wild hedgehogs. For you, what is the thing about hedgehogs that makes you so interested in the animal?
So they're the only spiny mammal we have in this country. They're a fond creature. They're loved by people generally as well. But for me personally, it goes back a long way to the 1980s, because I've been rescuing wildlife for some time, and it was the first wild animal that I actually rescued, which was a hedgehog. And when I was a child, I went round encouraging people to make their gardens hedgehog friendly. So later in life, I worked for a bit abroad, but I came back to the UK and I focused on rescuing wild hedgehogs. But it's also because they're on the red list of becoming endangered. They do need help. There's lots of wildlife that needs help, but particularly hedgehogs, their population has been dwindling at an alarming rate over the last decade.
Martin Maylin, the founder of the Hornbeam Wood Hedgehog Sanctuary, speaking to me earlier. There's been a massive decline, I think you know this, in hedgehogs, which is really sad because when was the last time you saw one? Because they're very rare now. They used to be. You used to be able to spot them all over the place, but so rare now. If you look, and Martin runs this family-run charity. They do amazing work. Hornbeam Wood Hedgehog Sanctuary. Just have a look at their webpage or their Instagram page. There's some videos on there of hedgehogs and the baby hedgehogs in particular. Goodness me, they are really cute.